Hey, everybody, you found us. We're back again with another episode of What's Your Mount Rushmore? It's our podcast. It's your favorite new podcast, right? Of course it is. It's the podcast where we count down our top 4 favorite things and a bunch of different categories, and we have a blast doing it. My name's John Hansen.
And I'm Mark Duvel, and I'm going to steal a line from another podcast John and I like. We are going to podcast the shit out of this episode. I can promise you that.
Oh,
and here's why. This is a heavy one, man, and it's a fun one. It's a cool one. Anyone who loves movies, these kind of movies, you're going to jump right in on this. We are going to be discussing our Mount Rushmore, because this is the What's Your Mount Rushmore podcast, I might add. This is going to be the Mount Rushmore of mob movie characters. Forget about it. These are going to be fun. How can anyone who loves cinema not love gangster, mob, mafia movies, organized crime movies? We're kind of covering it all. We're kind of throwing that all into one big bag of mob movie characters. And there's some heavy stuff here, and there's some classics we'll be discussing. I'm positive of it. So I don't think we should waste time dicking around with the little filibuster stuff here. Let's get into this topic, because I can't wait. I know we say it a lot. We don't know each other's choices. We love to reveal them as we're doing our podcast, and then we can react naturally to it. And sometimes we do have matches, and I have to assume we might on this topic, but hey, I've assumed that before and been completely way wrong. So without further ado, I'm going to give you my first pick, and I'm going to come out of the gate with thunder and lightning as it relates to a mob character, because I'm going right at the gold standard of mob movies, which is The Godfather. You can't, it's undeniable. But again, we're not talking movies. We're talking characters from movies. So the character I'm going to place in position number 1 on Mount Rushmore is Vito Corleone. And I do that because, one, I want to get it out of the way, because he's the godfather of the topic we're talking about.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
What makes him so special to me is this. One, it's the Godfather, but I feel like I'm picking one of the most unique cinema situations that there is. And here's what I mean by that. My favorite character is Vito Corleone. What's unique about that is he was played in Godfather 1, the first Godfather, by obviously Marlon Brando, who won an Oscar for best actor for that role. And mind you, it was also Best Picture in 1973. So then, fast forward to 1975, The Godfather 2 comes out. Vito Corleone is now played by Robert De Niro. Oh, he wins an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And yet again, it's the only time a sequel has won Best Picture Oscar for its second one. So those stats alone just prove I know what I'm talking about here. The character got 2 different Oscars by 2 different world-class legendary Hollywood actors. And that's the way to come out of the gate with thunder and lightning. And thunder is Marlon Brando, lightning is Robert De Niro, and that character. And talk about how cool it was, because it's such a different portrayal of the character. In the original Godfather, clearly Marlon Brando is older, and he knocks that character out of the park. And then when you go back in time in Godfather 2, De Niro crushes it, showing you what Vito Corleone was like when he got to New York and the United States after the long boat ride from Italy.
I mean, that's the beauty of that character. You get to see him as a young man and literally up to his dying day through, in the movies.
And most importantly, you're seeing it done by basically 2 of the best who have ever done it. The 2 guys who played this one character. So it's like the ultimate use of the phrase 2 for 1. You get 2 world-class actors for 1 role. And there you go. So that's what I'm going to dump right out of the gate. I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't give a quick shout out to a childhood friend of mine. He is literally who turned me on to The Godfather at a pretty young age, and he was well into it already. I'm only going to say his first name. It's Tony. He'll know who he is if he actually listens to this. He went on to be incredibly much more successful than me. He went to Harvard Law. I'm not going to use his last name because I'm afraid he would sue me.
What?
But he really was a great friend when we were kids, and and of course he's Italian. But he's the one who turned me on to The Godfather, both 1 and 2, and then I actually saw Godfather 3 in the theater with him. And it was a pretty big deal because he was way into it. He had read the books by Mario Puzo, the whole thing. But a quick shout out to him because he is kind of who ignited my interest in these kind of movies and introduced me to, the Godfather trilogy. So there's my big answer for spot number 1.
Yeah, you had a hell of a monologue right there. I think you're trying to go for an Oscar of your own with that little monologue you just went on.
I forgot. Yeah. Oh, by the way, here's John.
Yeah. And we have to wrap up now. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Should I thank the sponsor now and just call it a day?
Anus.
Oh, no, sorry. But as you can tell, I mean, I really do. I mean, those are just incredible movies. And again, because I warn people, you've warned people when we kick off podcasts, I'm going to have to assume you have a character from The Godfather. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and now I'll listen to your monologue, you shithead.
Honestly, I was considering The Godfather, but then I remembered I'd never even seen any of those movies. So I couldn't honestly put something on the... I'm funning you here. That's funny.
You son of a gun, you. Forget about it, you fugazi.
What kind of a jackass has never seen any of the Godfather movies? I'm sure they're out there. There's probably some listening to us here. Well, if you haven't seen them, you're a jackass. Start with the first one.
I'm going to plead the fifth because there's someone I do know, and I don't want to dime them out.
I wasn't sure. I like you said, I was pretty sure you'd have someone from The Godfather.
Of course.
It comes down to 2 people. And, there's actually a whole slew of characters you might want to consider from the Godfather movies. But really, it comes down to 2 people. I chose Vito's son, his youngest son, Michael Corleone, who he himself became the Godfather as well. So it played by Al Pacino. I definitely was weighing between Vito and Michael, and the 2 Dons, I guess. And
you kind of have to, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could go with a deeper character. There's other great characters. Like we could almost say, do a Mount Rushmore of Godfather characters that aren't named Michael or Vito, and we'd still have fun with it because we could easily come up with another Rushmore. You know what I mean?
You're damn straight. And I don't want to start rattling them off just in case we actually do come to that, because I would love to get more get deep track on the Godfather trilogy. No problem at all on that.
Future episode, maybe we'll tackle that down the road. But ultimately, I ended up choosing Michael for 2 main reasons. The first one, his character does go through such a transition. In the beginning of the first movie, he wants nothing to do with the family business, Michael, and his father, Vito, doesn't want him in the family business. His 2 older brothers are heavily involved in the business, and he's not. And he's the good son. He's the war hero. They just want him to not be involved. But the way the movie, as they say, every time he thinks he's out, he gets pulled back in. I mean, he ends up becoming more involved than anyone in the family, as it turns out, especially over the course of the sequels. But so that was the main reason I wanted. The other reason was, at the end of the day, it's Al Pacino. He did not win an Academy Award. He was nominated for both the first and second movie Oscar. He didn't win them. Was able to win Oscars down the road. Al Pacino, I know we've talked about. He's one of our favorite actors, you and I. So we both love Al a lot.
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. You broke my heart.
A mini spoiler alert: he might pop up on a later pick of mine. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes.
Wouldn't surprise me.
I read that the American Film Institute ranked Michael Corleone as the 11th most iconic villain in movie history. And I thought that was interesting for a couple of reasons, that they're calling him a villain. But at the same time, I guess that makes sense. There's some people that call those types of characters tragic heroes because you sort of root for them on one hand, but they're not necessarily really good people.
Yeah, they are up to no good.
Yeah. So but it's interesting to categorize him as a villain. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
I do love the arc. That's what I struggled picking Vito over Michael too, by the way. I just had to make a decision and roll with it, because you're right. The arc of the character of Michael Corleone is a lot different than Vito's. And you're right. The family, Vito, his father, did not want him. I never wanted this for you, Senator Colio. He didn't want him to do this stuff, and next thing you know, he just was. He was all in, and
all in.
Man, like I said, the arc of how quickly his character went from 0 to 90 as it related to the family business it's unbelievable. It's what makes the movie so special, and it obviously is. It won 2 Best Picture Oscars for it.
Yeah, they're amazing movies. I love both of those movies a lot. So that's my first pick. What's your number 2?
I'm going to go to another just iconic movie when we're talking this genre. And the movie, I'll say the movie first. It's Goodfellas. And this is the character Tommy DeVito. And Tommy was played by, again, one of the regulars that just crushed it every time he took a role on like this. And it's played by Joe Pesci.
Yes.
Joe Pesci's character, Tommy DeVito. This dude, this guy, is nothing short of ruthless. He's unapologetic. He's a loose cannon, and he has an absolute raging temper. And yet he's this little guy. But yet he's one of the most scary character actors when it came to all these mob movies and mafia-related movies that Joe Pesci has been in. He's intimidating as all hell. And when I think of the movie Goodfellas, there's basically 2 scenes that really kind of show the 2 sides of him, but they both kind of steer back to rage and how quickly he can fly off the handle.
Sure.
The first scene I'm going to talk about, it's when the whole crew, they're in their little hangout joint, and they're all drinking and playing cards. And Tommy, he's given shit to Spider. Spider's the character played ironically by Michael Imperioli from The Sopranos. He played Christopher in The Sopranos. But this is when he was young and getting his start in acting. He was this kind of secondary role in Goodfellas, and he was just kind of their minion, bringing them their sandwiches and their drinks while they're playing cards. Well, long story short, this kid, Spider, he mouths off to Tommy DeVito. Tommy first shoots him in the foot. And then they cut back to like in a future, like not far down the road in the movie. They're back in the same place, doing the same thing. They're drinking, they're smoking, and Spider, now with his foot in a giant bandage, he's still slinging drinks to these guys. Well, Tommy DeVito is giving Spider shit, and Tommy has to hear from Spider. He goes,
"Why don't you go fuck yourself, Tommy?"
That's fucking right. I don't believe what I just heard. Hey, Spider, hey.
And then the whole room goes, "Whoa, you gonna let him get away with that?" Well, he didn't, because then he shot him dead. It's over nothing. Like he killed one of his own guys for nothing. All because he got embarrassed, basically.
Hothead.
It was just such a crazy scene because it escalates so quickly. So again, the thing about Joe Pesci, and again, I'm focused on Tommy DeVito, so I do want to keep it in that world. The other one, the other scene is clearly the iconic scene where again the whole crew is now at a different restaurant. And him and Ray Liotta, rest in peace, are having an exchange about Henry Hill's character, played by Ray Liotta. He's giving Tommy DeVito kind of a hard time for being funny after he's telling this iconic story in the iconic scene, but it's a funny story in the movie.
Well, I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown. I amuse you. I make you laugh. I'm here to fucking amuse you. What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
But so trippy about Joe Pesci, though, is he's also, again, I don't want to spend a lot of time because there's so much to talk about the 4 characters I'm choosing as my favorite. But it is kind of a blurred line with Joe Pesci playing Tommy DeVito and then also playing the character Nicky Santoro in the movie Casino. They're almost the same damn dude. They're both hotheads. You know what I mean? Like there's not a big difference between how Joe Pesci played that role. And ironically, they're both Martin Scorsese movies. So when Scorsese makes a movie, he clearly knows what he's getting with the old go-to crew. And Joe Pesci is clearly one of them. So that's my second pick. It's It's Tommy DeVito from The Goodfellas, played by Joe Pesci.
Hard to argue with that one. And I, much like The Godfather, I was pretty certain that you would end up having a pick from Goodfellas. It might be my favorite mob-themed movie of all time, actually. That movie is excellent, and I'll slide in with my pick on that because it's also from Goodfellas. It's Henry Hill. It's Henry Hill played by Ray Liotta, who I think was absolutely brilliant in that movie. I think Ray Liotta was outstanding. It's hard to imagine anybody playing that character. And again, it's kind of an arc because at the beginning of that movie, well, of course, at the very beginning of the movie, it's a different actor playing him as a young kid.
Yeah, he's
but
a kid.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Even the arc of while Ray Liotta is playing the character, he's playing the character over the course of maybe 20 some years or so. And it's just told, the story is told so well. Henry Hill was based on a real person. I mean, he is a real person. He's actually passed away now. He was a real person who was heavily involved in a New York organized crime family for 25, 30 years or something like that. I just think that it was so well done, so well written. It was based on a book kind of like The Godfather, but this book was based on fact, and they made it into the movie. The thing about mafia characters I think that is interesting is that they always are juggling a lot of stuff. And Henry Hill's character is probably perfect in this sense. When I say juggling a lot, they have stuff going on in their personal life. Usually they're having problems at home with their wife or their kids. They got issues going on with quote unquote work, that they're dealing with. Half the time they're just trying to stay alive. They're trying to keep the bosses happy, keep underlings from killing them, keep the bosses from coming back and killing them. And the way Goodfellas plays out, like the last, maybe 20, 30 minutes of that movie exemplifies that so much. How Ray Liotta, you actually are the first time you watch that movie, you're on the edge of your seat because you're
stressed watching it.
Absolutely. You're stressed because you're feeling his stress. He's under so much stress as he's going through all this stuff until it finally all implodes on him. And the interesting thing about Henry Hill too, is that the real person, he consulted on the movie, and Robert De Niro would actually talk to him frequently to ask questions about how his character, Jimmy, the way he talked, the way he walked, even the way he held his cigarette, were things that Robert De Niro was talking to Henry Hill about, and Henry Hill was advising him on. And he was paid a bunch of money. He was paid like $400,000 to consult on that movie, if you can believe it. And at the time he was supposed to be in witness protection. So he kind of had an interesting. His witness protection didn't go so well. He was arrested a number of times for different things. He didn't really seem to be hiding too much, but he did.
He was an interesting guy on screen and off, to say the least, no doubt about it. But I so echo what you're saying. And obviously, my second pick is from Goodfellas. So here, now we're already talking. Again, look at these movies.
Yeah.
These are not schlub movies, man. This is iconic stuff here. The Godfather and Goodfellas. And we're just halfway. Well, we're both halfway through now. We both got two on the board here.
Yeah. And we talk about Scorsese in this one. Scorsese's going to come back up in my list later. See, I mean, he's the king of mafia movies. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see what else that you've got. And the other thing, one last thing I'll say about Goodfellas that I love is the music in that movie. You know what I mean? The way they tie the music together with the scenes, it almost more so than any other movie of that period.
I think it's par for the course for Martin Scorsese. He usually incorporates just brilliant music for perfect moments in the film. I mean, he's one of the best to ever do it. And a lot of the people that have played these characters that we're going to be, continuing to talk about, they're the best that's ever done it too. But yeah, so I love it. I love that we have the Godfather and Goodfellas already on the board. If you don't mind, I'll keep this moving. Because I know the whatever we have left, there's going to be plenty to discuss and talk about. The next one I'm going to go with on my list, my pick number 3, is from the movie The Untouchables. This is the character who's a real person. It's Al Capone. And again, we've already talked about this guy. Robert De Niro plays Al Capone in the movie The Untouchables. And, this was such a... And again, my same childhood buddy, Tony, also introduced me to this movie, The Untouchables. And, this is just a legendary story about Al Capone. what Chicago was like during Prohibition, and the group of law enforcement officers called the Untouchables, led by Elliot Ness, how they are doing everything in their power to try to put a stop to the empire that's led by Al Capone.
Freeze, I want you to find this Nancy boy, Elliot Ness. I want him dead. I want his family dead. I want his house burnt to the ground. I want to go to the middle of the night. I want to piss on his ashes.
And ultimately, they do get him. And again, this is not a spoiler. If you don't know this, then please, go listen to something else at this point. Because you have to know the history to some degree, even if it's broad strokes of Al Capone.
Yeah.
He did get arrested.
It's not even about the movie. It's U.S. history, whether you've watched the movie or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you don't know that, I'm very unapologetic. If you're like, hey, he just spoiled the Untouchables. But he does such a good job at portraying. That's the thing. Al Capone has been played a lot of times in different TV shows and in different movies. This is, in my opinion, the best depiction, the best portrayal of Al Capone. And of course, it's done by, guess who? Robert De Niro. And there's a scene specifically, God, in that movie, because I saw this probably when I was about 13 or 14 years old for the first time, the Untouchables. It's the scene where he has like his whole crime syndicate at this really nice ballroom, and he's walking around and he's telling them a story, and he kind of transitions that into an analogy talking about baseball. And while he's talking, he gets a baseball bat in his hand that someone gives him. And then all of a sudden they zone in on one guy. When he goes, because you're part of a team. And then this guy, team. The next thing you know, he's got a baseball bat to the back of his head as Al Capone literally beats him to death in front of a room full of guys wearing tuxedos and very high-end suits at a very high-end dinner. In front of everyone, without any regard, Al Capone beat him to death with a baseball bat. And when you're 13 or 14 and you see that scene, holy smokes, that has stuck with me my whole life. And I've watched The Untouchables numerous times, and every time that scene it raises my arm hair, because I'm like, wow, this guy is ruthless. And a part of that is because of De Niro's work playing Al Capone. And part of why I want him on my list too is that he was a real dude. Al Capone is a part of our American history as it relates to the mob and Prohibition.
I love that. I've watched a lot of movies, even documentaries. I've watched a number of documentaries about the early days of the mafia and the Chicago mafia and Al Capone. He was a ruthless dude, fascinating guy, but man, ruthless, absolutely ruthless. And you wonder how much of that, because Untouchables is an excellent movie, and I love that movie a lot. And that's a great pick because you're right. It for two reasons. One, it's Al Capone. I mean, probably the king of all mobsters, but it's also Robert De Niro.
Yeah, yet again. So I mean,
you get a nice little two for there.
Another 2 for 1. I got 2 different characters on my Mount Rushmore that are played by Robert De Niro. I mean, so again, clearly you understand how much I respect Robert De Niro by listening to this list. I do think, and I'll end it with this. I have a feeling that in the scheme of things, that if you were to ask like 100 dudes, what's your Mount Rushmore of mob characters? I'm probably in the minority going with the Untouchables, because there are so many to choose from. And again, like every other list we've done up to this point, I always feel like an absolute clown because of some I leave off, but you have to. And I'll stop talking now and let you have your number thrice.
We should figure out how to say 1, 2, 3, 4 in Italian is what we should be doing.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm not as hooked on phonics as you, so you can figure that out.
We're not nearly well enough prepared for this topic, apparently. But anyway, I love that pick, and you're right. Actually, I can see it not being.
Wait, I gotta stop you. So sorry, because I didn't mean to talk over there. So you just said we're not prepared for this episode. So my apologies, John. I didn't go learn Italian for this episode.
Well, damn it. What were you thinking? It's literally 4 words that you had to learn.
Gabagool.
Capiche?
Gabagool.
You can name about 40 different sausages in Italian, I'm sure, but you can't learn how to say 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think I've referenced before. I struggle with one language. I don't need to get cute.
Yeah, food as well.
Yes.
But anyway,
All right, what's
so
what's your pick at number 3?
he was just about to walk off the stage. We're going to bring it back out here. Robert De Niro, everybody. It's
Really?
another Robert De Niro character, and this time it's loosely based on a real person. It's Sam Rothstein from Casino. Everyone called him Ace Rothstein, and loosely based on a real person. Unlike Henry Hill, who was directly based on a real person, the real person this movie was based on, the movie Casino, his name was Frank Rosenthal, and he ran casinos in Vegas for the Chicago Mafia in the 1970s, which is essentially what Ace was doing in the movie Casino. And we've touched on De Niro so much. He's an excellent actor in general. He's particularly good at playing those mafioso types, and has popped up in a lot of these movies. By the way, of course, for those that don't know, Casino is another Martin Scorsese movie. So, De Niro and Scorsese have a great working relationship over the years, and certainly complement each other. The thing about that Rosenthal guy, though, Frank Rosenthal, he survived his own assassination attempt, and that kind of forced him to leave Vegas, as maybe you would want to. If somebody's trying to kill you, you might want to move out of town. He actually ended up living a full life, though. He didn't. He lived until 2008. Died when he was I think he was 79 years old, and he died. But it came out after he died. FBI released a bunch of records saying that he was a very high-level informant in the 70s. So while he was working for the mob, he was on the phone with the FBI giving away all their secrets. So the fact that he survived to be 79 years old is probably a minor miracle. But I did have another quick story about that set. So I know you love Casino. One of the actors in that movie that doesn't appear in a lot of these types of movies, but he was very good in this one, was Don Rickles. And
yes, he was.
You and I both love Don Rickles too. So a funny story about the set as they were filming that. Quentin Tarantino at the time was a young up and coming director. I think he had probably done Pulp Fiction, and I suppose maybe Reservoir Dogs, but he hadn't really done much else yet. He was still kind of the young new hot guy in Hollywood in terms of directing, and he was a huge fan of Scorsese, as probably most young directors are. So he wanted to come visit the set, and he did. And when he got there, Don Rickles apparently was very friendly with Tarantino. And so when he showed up, Don Rickles jumps up, like I think they were even in the middle of a scene. Don Rickles stopped the filming. He says, "Wait, everybody, stop. We finally have a real director here. Get him in here. We got to try and convince the producers to hire this guy and fire this bum Scorsese." He's saying this in front of 100 people.
That's what makes Rickles so great, man.
One of many reasons why he's so great. Tarantino just gets flush red because he's so embarrassed. His hero is hearing Don Rickles say all these things, and he's just a kid. And then everybody broke up laughing, including De Niro, including Scorsese. Everybody just broke up laughing and loosened the tension. But I heard Quentin Tarantino tell that story once on a talk show. But I thought that was a hilarious thing to
That's
mention
hilarious.
But it had nothing to do with the character of Sam Rothstein. But it's just a funny little tie into the movie. But as much as we've talked about De Niro, I don't need to gush too much about him. We both love him. We love that movie. It was a pretty easy pick for me.
I do have a question for you though on something you just said, because I didn't know that. You said that he survived an assassination attempt. Is the assassination you're referencing? Is it the scene that is actually depicted in the casino when they blow up his car?
And because I think he was in the car, but he survived the explosion
outside of a Tony Romo's. That's in the movie, at least. That's where his car is parked in front of.
Yep, it is in the movie. I'm not sure if it's in front of a Tony Romo's or not, but I'm sure they pulled that little true life factoid and used it in the movie for sure. But as if somebody blew up my car and I was lucky enough to survive, I think I'd probably leave town. I don't know.
And just for the record, for the weirdos who have not seen Casino, we're not referring to Tony Romo, the unfortunate failure of a quarterback that played for the Dallas Cowboys. Like a fine rib steak establishment. Has nothing to do with that goofball.
It was a pretty good restaurant back in the day for ribs, if I remember right. I think I was there a few times. Do they even still have them?
No idea. But yeah, I just, for some reason, I always remember that scene because they clearly show the sign of the restaurant before that car.
Oh, yeah. Maybe it was a product placement.
Yeah, maybe. But that's a great pick, man, because you're 100% on. Again, we're we're just going layer after layer of just classic film. Again, a quick recap of the characters we're talking about are coming from The Godfather, Goodfellas, The Untouchables, and now Casino. So I'll keep it going because you guessed it. I'm going to throw a big wild curveball here, and my final character pick also comes from a Martin Scorsese movie, but it's one we haven't even mentioned yet, and it's one of his more recent ones because this is from 2006 or 7, and it actually is, believe it or not, of all the movies we just talked about, it was Scorsese's first Best Picture Oscar. I'm talking about The Departed, and because we're talking about characters from these kind of movies, I'm talking about Frank Costello, played by Jack Nicholson. Unbelievable role.
Of course.
This guy, Jack Nicholson, he's unbelievable in this part, playing Frank Costello. He's sinister, he's calculated, he like oozes fear and confidence, and he does it only the way someone like a Jack Nicholson could.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
It's unbelievable how like just powerful that movie is and how unique it is, because now we finally get out of Chicago and New York, and we're finally addressing a different kind of mob. It's the Irish mob. It's not the stereotypical Italian scene that we're so used to. It's Frank Costello is Irish, and just as scary as anyone else we've talked about. What's wild is, we've thrown out, references here and some stats and facts about like Oscar and Best Picture, Best Actor. And believe it or not, Jack Nicholson did not win for that. I mean, he does have 2 Best, Actor, wins in his life. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and As Good as It Gets. But he did not win. And actually, I think he won for Best Supporting. So he actually has 3. That was for Terms of Endearment, if I remember correctly.
Terms of Endearment would be on my Mount Rushmore of mafia movies, I would say.
That's a different show. But isn't it wild, though, to think that Martin Scorsese did not win an Oscar for Best Picture until 2007? That means, this is where I will list these. That means he did not win for Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Gangs of New York, The Wolf of Wall Street, and The Irishman. He was nominated, but he never won.
Wow. So he was nominated for all of those?
I don't know if he was nominated for all of those, but I'm just pointing out that he didn't win. Let alone if he was nominated or not.
Oh. Look
at that resume, my friends. So if you're wondering why you're referencing Martin Scorsese, think no further. Who's he's one of the best. He might be the best.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I think he is. I think he is the best. I think he's absolutely the best. And he just keeps coming back to that genre.
When you think of just the pillars of directors in Hollywood, how is he not one of them? Okay, well, I'll concede Steven Spielberg is probably one of them. He'd be in that conversation. Maybe James Cameron, just because of his just huge commercial success with his movies. But man, Martin Scorsese knows how to direct and tell a story, and he knows how to get the best out of these guys that he always goes to, that are the actors who I think they're just made for each other.
Yeah. I mean, he has a way of using the same actors repeatedly, and his way of making a movie works with these particular actors. And it doesn't have to be a mafia movie, like you mentioned, Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, he's a good storyteller through, and he doesn't write these movies necessarily, at least not all of them that I'm aware of, but he brings them together as a director. And I think the actors all appreciate him. I think most people do consider him to be one of the top elite directors in Hollywood. So I think he's probably considered to be up there with a Spielberg type, to be honest. He has to be, right? I mean, I don't think he's underappreciated. That's what I mean.
No.
Yeah.
Especially within the industry. No doubt.
Well, you had 4 scary guys on your list. There's no question about it. My last pick, I wouldn't necessarily call him a scary guy. He's another guy who kind of gets in over his head and ends up having a tragic ending, of course. It's Tony Montana from Scarface, played by the brilliant Al Pacino. Yeah, I love that movie Scarface. It was one of the first movies of that genre that I remember watching as a kid. You know, it was probably much too adult of a movie for me to be watching at whatever age I watched it the first time. I'm sure it was. I was probably way too young. But that character was created by two iconic filmmakers, actually. Oliver Stone wrote the screenplay for Scarface, and the movie was directed by Brian De Palma, who was kind of the king of those crime thriller type movies in the 70s and all the 70s through the 90s. De Palma, you know, he did movies like Body Double, Carlito's Way, The Untouchables. He directed that movie. So it's a kind of a nice tie-in for your Untouchables pick there as well. But the character, though, back to the character of Tony from Scarface, he was named one of the top 25 movie characters of all time by a variety of different magazines, different online sources, all put him in that top 25. Al Pacino, excellent in that movie. Again, he starts out as an immigrant who's struggling with life, struggling to find his way, becomes a drug kingpin, and meets a tragic ending.
Do you want to play rough? Okay. Say hello to my little friend.
Sorry, spoiler alert. He doesn't survive the movie. Again, if you haven't seen Scarface by this point in your life, I'm not going to feel any guilt about spoiling it for you. But Pacino actually worked with trainers on the very physical aspects of the role. He even trained with Roberto Duran, the boxer, in how to move around and
did he really?
You know, the physical parts of it. He did, yeah. And I'll give you I got a little fun fact for you here.
Uh-oh.
So Oliver Stone wrote the screenplay, Scarface. Who do you think Oliver Stone's favorite football player was?
I don't know. You're putting me on the spot there, Dink.
I'll give you a hint. What's the character's name that I'm talking about here? Tony Montana.
Joe Montana was his favorite?
Yes. So we came up with the name because he loved Joe. You got to remember, this is like 1980. I think the movie came out in 83, so he was probably writing this around 1981, 82. Joe Montana was on top of the NFL at that point in time, and Oliver Stone loved him, so he stole the name.
That's really where Tony Montana?
That's where the name came from, yeah. Because Oliver Stone loved Joe Montana.
I did not know that. Yeah, every time you dump some knowledge on me, and I have no idea how you retain this shit, but congrats, my friend.
That one I looked up. I didn't know that one. I didn't pull that one out of my ass, but it is interesting.
Oh, look at you playing the Honest Abe card. God, if you said it earlier, if you don't like the movie Scarface, and that was another one I struggled with. See, and here's what's crazy, is after hearing all these iconic characters and played by iconic actors, I am ashamed. I feel like an absolute anus that I did not pick Al Pacino to be on my Mount Rushmore for a mob character. But I really struggled with it because obviously Scarface was very much on my radar, but so was Donnie Brasco. His role in that movie was phenomenal. And so was it in Carlito's Way, where he played Carlito Brigante. And that was an unbelievable movie.
I got fucking diapers. I shit my pants every day. I can't walk. I can't hump. You know? Go ahead and kill me, you cocksucker.
I feel like a schmuck for not having Al Pacino represented. I'm glad we got to talk about him. I'm glad we got to talk about all these characters because, again, they're like the backbone of this type of genre of American cinema.
Yeah, it is. And I think even though you didn't get Pacino on, I think we both should be happy with the fact that we have the total list of movies that we're covering. You know, granted, we shared some characters from The Goodfellas. We shared characters on Godfather. That's not only to be expected. I think you almost should count on the sharing characters for some of these movies. But at least we touched on some of the best movies ever made. I mean, these movies aren't just the best mob movies ever made. They're truly some of the best movies ever made. They just happen to be about the mob. So we whether feel what you want about Al Pacino, I would have loved to have got Joe Pesci on my list, but it didn't quite work out for that. But I'm happy with my list. I know you're happy with your list, and we should both be happy with all the great movies we got to talk about.
And this will be another one too. Every episode, if you're listening, you hear us talk about this. Please engage, because these are hard. These are hard to narrow down to 4, and part of the fun is I know so far, and I know you'll agree. I've had comments where people will send me their Mount Rushmore, and I'm like, oh my God, how did I forget that? I don't know if that'll happen with this one because I really put a ton of thought into this because it's such an interest for me. I mean, I love these movies. But please, be a part of it. Share your opinion. These are just ours. And that, again, it's why it's called What's Your Mount Rushmore, is we get to sit here and fill time and riffing and rapping and talking about what we like. And we want to hear what the people who are giving this a listen, what do you like? So, again, check out our website. It's just whatsyourmountrushmore.com, at What's Your Mount Rushmore on all the social media platforms. And we just appreciate you giving this a listen. I don't think it's any secret. We're having a lot of fun doing this. And sky's the limit. There's no end in sight. We have so many topics to get to. And it's just too fun to stop. So thank you for giving this a listen. We love that this is growing, and we want it to continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a fun one. I'm glad we chose this one. I'm glad we got a chance to do it. And you and I have talked about this. We'll probably revisit the mob genre down the road too.
I think we have to. So that all being said, I'm going to thank our sponsor. I think it's a pretty appropriate one considering the topic we just talked about for almost an hour. And that is, thank you, Showbiz Pizza Place.